Welcome to Twisted States, where we take a look, state by state, at some of America's most nefarious killers, elusive cryptids, and bizarre mysteries. On this journey, we're headed to Nebraska, where we're going to take a deep dive into Stephen D. Richards. Okay, really quick before we hop into the episode, I just want to say thank you for your patience. For those of you that were getting used to my weekly content and bothered to come back after I fell off the planet, my deepest apologies. Sometimes my mental health is more important than my hobbies. So I had to take a little bit of a hiatus there, and we're going to make it better this year. I'm definitely reducing it from the weekly content because that's a little bit more than I can handle. I wish it was easier, but I kind of like the idea of having more than a week to do my research and kind of get a better feel for the information that I share. So once again, like I said, thank you for coming back or being here. If you're new here, I appreciate you. So let's go ahead and take a look at this episode. Admitted to the Union March 1st of 1867, Nebraska was the 37th state to join the United States. It's located in the Midwest and is the only triply landlocked U.S. state. It's bordered by South Dakota to the north, Iowa to the east, and Missouri to the southeast, both across the Missouri River, Kansas to the south, Colorado to the southwest, and Wyoming to the west. There were several indigenous peoples, including Omaha, Missouri, Ponca, Pawnee, Ottawa, and various branches of the Lakota or Sioux tribes living in the region for thousands of years before European exploration. And the state is crisscrossed by many historic trails, including that of the Lewis and Clark expedition. The climate there is there's two major climate zones. The eastern 2/3 of the state has a humid continental climate, and the Panhandle adjacent areas bordering Colorado have a primarily semi-arid climate. There's some very wide variations. Like, they definitely have 4 seasons there, and there's a lot of violent thunderstorms and tornadoes occurring primarily during the spring and summer. And the Chinook wind tends to warm the state significantly in the winter and early spring. So this week we are talking about Stephen D. Richards. Stephen D. Richards was executed on April 26, 1879, at the tender age of 23 years old. Altogether, he confessed to 9 murders. So Stephen D. Richards was born March 18th, 1856 in Wheeling, West Virginia, to average parents. His mother was a devout Methodist and followed church guidance pretty strictly. She passed September 16th of 1871 when Stephen was merely 15 years old. His father was a farmer, and that's how he took care of the family. At the time of Stephen's execution, he had 5 sisters that were living. He did keep in contact with his sisters. His father, once he was arrested, didn't have any communications with him. Stephen D. Richards is kind of fascinating to me because he actually wrote out a full confession. He did try to change it a couple times before he was actually executed, but he does go through and talk about everything that he did. And, they refer to him as the Old West Ted Bundy, because the guy, he wasn't some drop-dead gorgeous guy or anything, but he was pleasant to the eyes, average looking, very, very nice, very polite, toward people, fit in really easy just about anywhere, didn't have any problems. And, you know, just not what you would expect for somebody that did what he did. So with that, it was really bizarre that he was the way he was and that he spoke of what he did the way he did. So of his 9 victims, the first victim that he speaks of in his confession was a man whose first name was later to be revealed as John, with no last name given. They were out, right? He was out riding. He was headed back to the town that he was staying in at the time. And he ran into this guy and they were riding together. No big deal, you know. Company on the trip along the way. Well, it was after dark. They lost sight of the road. They decided to, hunker down, camp for the night so that they would be able to find safe passage in the morning without, accidentally riding into the river or something. And as they were getting settled in, they're sitting around the campfire and they start gambling. Now, once again, this is all Stephen's confession. This is all from his side of the story. There's no other sides given because all these people are dead. Apparently, while they were gambling during the night, according to Stephen, John didn't have very good luck, and he lost the majority of his money to Stephen. So they went to sleep. They woke up the next morning, and John says, "Hey, I know that, I lost a lot of money to you and stuff and all, but it was all in good fun, right? Like, we were just, passing the time in the middle of the night. So you're going to give me my money back, right? Because, at least part of it, because, that wouldn't be cool to take all my money, we're out traveling and stuff and whatever, and you're just going to, basically rob me? Like, what?" And Stephen said, "No, I won your money, fair and square. It's mine now. Thank you. I appreciate you, but you're not getting it back." And, this, argument ensued between them. Like I said, once again, this is according to Stephen. He always ends up, turning it into, this self-defense situation, I feel, with everyone. It's like he's just, it's totally justified in his mind, Stephen was, pretty adamant on how he was being wronged, and this man was pushing him. It didn't give him an opportunity to do anything other than fight. So he ended up shooting John and then dragged his body down and tossed it in the river and went back on his way and headed back to town without him. Within a couple days of that, a man approached him and asked him, "Hey, where's John? Where's my friend, I know you were riding with him and then he just hasn't been seen again." And at that time, Stephen was like, "Oh, crap. People are asking about this guy. Well, what do I do?" So he tried to, feed the guy a line. And the guy was like, "No, I don't believe you. Hey, where's my friend?" So he disposed of that man as well. He always had this answer, you know what I mean? He was just reason. This is I didn't want this guy to get it. It's self-preservation. So of course I did him in, right after this point, Richard started passing counterfeit money. Some people that he ran into from New York were doing that, and he got in on that. And he went and bought a horse and buggy setup. And it didn't take long for the person that he purchased this horse and buggy rig from to realize that the money was bogus. And so he, once again, cornered him and said, "Hey," the guy was like, "Hey, the money you gave me, it's no good. So I'm going to need my horse and buggy back because you can't go around passing off counterfeit money. And once again, you guessed it, he shot this man. And in his confession, he said that this guy was probably about 19 years old. He shot him and left his body out in the trees and disposed of him where, away from town where he wouldn't be found, because he accused him of something he actually did. Once again. Yeah. Then, in March of 1877, once again traveling, he was traveling with a man by the name of Jim G. I'm not sure how to pronounce this name, but I have no idea. Sounds right to me. No clue. My apologies. He woke him up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Was like, "Hey, it's time to go. We need to pack up." They had like camped or whatever, and he woke him up. He said, "We need to get an early start, and we need to get going." And this guy said, "You're lying. It's the middle of the night." And he said no. And he had already decided that he was going to shoot the first person to call him a liar. That was basically what he had been doing all along anyway. But they were in this confrontation, and the way he puts it, the way he presents it, is like he was just defending himself, that this guy was not going to back down and was threatening him. What I've noticed about Stephen D. Richardson, reading his confession and the information that was available online, and all the accounts and like newspaper articles and stuff about him, was that he really was very vain. He was very egotistical. He responded well to any kind of positive, reinforcement. And he was more concerned about the fact that they wouldn't let him shave when he was in jail. He wanted to be clean shaven when they hung him, and that was what was important to him. He didn't, he didn't present himself like somebody that, would get their hands dirty the way that he did. Does that make sense? Like he was very, I don't know, like, very petty and very, very just, I don't know. The guy really was full of himself and thought that he was like God's gift, He made comments about lovers he had taken and things like that, and it was always like, oh yeah, like I've never had any problem in the romance department, and I have no issues. And he was very cocky about that, and very, like I said, just vain, and just, I don't know, this man was just crazy. 23 years old, like, wow. Anyway, so shortly after shooting Jim G, he was wrongly arrested on March 21st for a murder that he had nothing to do with. So they ended up releasing him early in the beginning of, I believe he spent about a year in jail for that, before they finally acquitted him and released him in 1878. So at that point, shortly after that, there was a man named Jasper Harrelson. Jasper Harrelson was in jail with some other acquaintances of Stephen's, and Stephen hints at helping him flee prison, helping him to escape. So at the point where he, because of his interactions with Jasper or whatever, he was friends with him, whatever, he knew of his wife and children or whatever, and he went to Jasper's house where Mary Harrelson, Daisy, Mabel, and Jesse Jr., or Jasper Jr., aka Jesse, all lived, and was staying there along with another man by the name of Brown. So it was a Sunday morning. Before the sun came up, according to Stephen's account, he went outside and went behind a shed and dug a grave for all of the family members. Shortly after that, he went back in. Brown got up and headed out to do the morning chores. At the point that Brown got up to walk out to do the morning chores, Richards went about finding, grabbing an axe. Here's his account. According to his account, he grabbed an axe and he went into the room. It was a 2-room sod house that they were in. So they were all sleeping in the same room. I think Brown was sleeping in the room where the kitchen and everything was. But the bedroom, they had several beds set up in there. And he was sleeping across the room from the other family members. But he took an axe and murdered 10-year-old Daisy Harrelson, 4-year-old Mabel Harrelson, Jasper Jr., aka Jesse Harrelson, who was 2, and their mother Mary. Now, according to some of the newspaper reports, it was a little bit less clean and neat than what he described, because the way he described it was he quietly and stealthily took an axe and just went around and booped them all in the head, and they were dead. But according to the newspaper, he actually took a clothes iron and disposed of a couple of the family members, and then the youngest one he took care of by hand. His reason for killing this entire family, for removing 4 people from this planet, was that Mary wasn't exactly wasn't a good woman in his eyes, as far as like she had been arrested a few times and stuff, and had a criminal background and was kind of sketchy. But she also had a big mouth, and she had gone through his trunk and read his letters and knew that he was a murderer, and she was really bad about running her mouth. He was very terrified that Mary was going to go out and tell somebody. You know, once again, that self-preservation took over everything else and all common sense. Even though he shouldn't have had these letters around anyway, if that was what he was worried about, if he had this stuff written down, like, why would you, whatever. But, yeah, his biggest fear was that she would, like, tell somebody, what she knew about him. And his only way of combating that in his mind was to take her out. And it just apparently made sense to also, dispose of her children. I don't know. So, on December 9th of 1878, about 5 miles from the Harrelson property, he disposed of yet another, his final murder occurred, and that was Peter Anderson. Now, going back to the Harrelsons, he was purchasing a quarter of their land, and I'm not sure exactly how he did it. He claimed after he had killed everybody, and then he took the bodies out and buried them in the shallow grave that he had dug for them early that morning. He told Brown one thing, I guess. It was on a Sunday, so he probably told Brown that, they went to church or something. I don't know. And then, Brown took off, and then he told everybody else that the family went with Brown. He did his best to try to, cover his bases, and, sometimes he got lucky, and it kind of kind of worked, which is crazy. But he was still like staying in the area, apparently. But there was a man he was working with, helping build a building about 5 miles from the Harrelson property, named Peter Anderson. And Peter Anderson approached him one morning and said, "You're poisoning me. Why are you poisoning me?" And apparently, Peter had also talked to some other people, and it wasn't just Stephen Richards that he was accused, that he was speaking these accusations to. He had also brought this up to other people and told them that he had this suspicion that Richards was poisoning him. Immediately, Richards is like, "No, what are you talking about? Like, excuse me? No, I'm not poisoning you. I don't, what are you talking about?" So, of course, he doesn't admit to whether or not he was actually poisoning this guy. He just said the guy accused him and it made him mad, and that he called him a liar and whatever. So, after that little exchange, it just kept getting more and more heated. And eventually, he ended up grabbing a hammer and hitting Peter in the head. And Peter didn't die immediately, but he took his body down to the cellar, and he was still breathing at the time, because he looked out and there were some men approaching. So he was trying to hide the body, and he hid the body down in the cellar, and he was still breathing, and he was really concerned he was going to yell out or whatever. So he finished the guy off, and he hid him underneath a pile of coal in the cellar, and told everybody, I don't know, he's not here. I don't know where he is, and played it off. And once again, self-defense. It wasn't like he was just trying to defend himself, and he just happened to kill the guy with a hammer and hide his body in the cellar. The original confession that he gave, Stephen Richards spoke very methodically about how he went about, setting an axe right outside the door after he went out and dug the grave in the middle, basically in the middle of the night, early in the morning while it was still dark. Waiting until Brown left to go do his chores, taking care of the family, cleaning up the blood and making everything look as normal as possible around the house. After doing so, burying the bodies, carrying them over and putting them in the grave. He gave a detailed, his version, very detailed as to what happened or whatever. And then later on, he kind of backpedaled. And shortly before his execution, tried to claim maybe there was somebody else that killed the Harrelson family. There could have been somebody else and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, he tried to claim that Peter Anderson was 100% self-defense. He didn't know what they were talking about. He was just defending himself. When it came time for his execution, normally, that's not a public thing, they're pretty private about that, with a very small number of people actually witnessing executions and things like that. But for Stephen Richards, they made it kind of public. There was about 2,000 people that witnessed him being hanged. It was a pretty big number. They, I guess, sold tickets or whatever, but they let a lot of people come and watch him be hanged, maybe to kind of put a message out, because this was in the 1870s. And, it was still pretty much the Wild West back then. So, yeah, things are a little bit more refined now, and you're less likely to get hung in the square in the US. Back then, though. Yeah, so this guy, they say he was this ladies' man and he was this charmer. And then there's also reference to him like dueling with people, and there's possibly other people that he shot along the way or whatever. But as far as his confession goes, he confessed to 9 killings outright. The one that actually got him the conviction and sentenced to hanging was his murder of Peter Anderson. Not even necessarily the Harrelson family, but Peter Anderson was the main case that they had like the most solid evidence on, and everything lined up with his confession and everything. So yeah. Anyway, so there you have it. Stephen D. Richards. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I think the main thing that I would say, and I would like to suggest, is that there's like, I would suggest looking up, I'll have the link in the description because it's actually posted on archive.org. I want to say there's probably about like 40 or 50 pages going over his like life and his confessions or whatever. It's Life and Confession of Stephen D. Richards. It's in the Library of Congress, so it's available on archive.org. Like I said, I'll post a link in the description of this episode. Yeah, very bizarre, man. Not your like typical idea of who a serial killer would be, or a murderer, I guess. And such a tragic story in the sense of him like not having the moral compass dialed in such a way to not kill people. And and it really sucks because it seems like from what people said, he was a pretty like chill person. One of his first jobs after leaving the farm after his mom died and he got a little bit older was working at an insane asylum where he would like cremate the deceased. He would take care of the deceased people, dispose of the dead bodies there. And he said that job was like really easy for him and kind of made it, kind of helped like break that barrier and make it less of a big deal to, like made it more natural and easy for him to kill, I'm thinking that the guy was born with the natural ability to just off people and not to think anything about it. That would be my guess. He can try to blame it on things like that, but I don't think that really has much of a bearing either way. I think he would have been destined to kind of head down this path regardless, just because of his general attitude and his view of the world. Still so curious. I really suggest going and reading that book, though. What I found very fascinating is there's a whole phrenology breakdown, because at the time that was a very common thing that was considered an acceptable standard in science was phrenology. And the phrenologist actually, there's all the different, which is like the measurement of your head, and they like zone out your cranium based, and give these different ratings based on the size of your head. But they talk about like the circumference of his head and the shape of his skull and whatever. And I found that interesting to be presented in such of a matter-of-fact type way. They didn't have all the DNA stuff and everything that we do now. And even now, like, we don't have a lot of the answers that are being, that are being seeked out. But phrenology is fascinating. Definitely written and showing a lot of like, signs of the times back then. It's really kind of interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for joining me. My apologies for such a long hiatus. And I'm going to be doing monthly episodes just to be on the safe side because, like I said, things have been a little crazy and rough. I will also say, please be sure to check me out on YouTube. I also have another channel, Disruptive Girl, where I do a little bit of everything. It's mostly crafting and vlogs. If you want to check that out, there'll be links in the description for all that stuff. If you like what you hear and you want to support the show, buy me a coffee. There's a link for that in the description as well. And my dog is making horrific noises in the background. I really hope my mic didn't pick that up, but it probably did. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. And I will see you next month as we continue to make our way across the United States, seeking out all these weirdos. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you next time. Bye.